All right, hockey fans, how is everybody doing on this cold, windy? It's April. It's 38 degrees. It should be 78. It was 78 here last week. And welcome to the first episode of Puck Blockers, the best NHL hockey podcast west of the equator. Exactly. This is my friend and my co-host, Paul, Captain Paul from the locker room. Some of you might know me as the screaming idiot with the puppets from Flying Fluffy Hockey. Paul?
What's going on there? What's going on there, Jaws? Is that what I should call you? Or should I call you Flying
Yeah.
Fluffy, right? Should we keep
No,
the motif?
no. The way I always explain this, in fact, this is a good chance to explain this right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Eric. My friends call me Jaws. Fluffy is the dog. And unfortunately, for those of you who are new here, Fluffy passed 2 weeks after the Panthers won the Cup last year.
I mean, this is. I mean, I'm really excited for this. This is going to be something that we've been kind of talking about for a while here with this podcast, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun having just us talking hockey and having good conversations because I feel like with both of our channels, like you're a Florida Panthers channel, I cover a lot of NHL stuff, but I'll admit I do heavily kind of go with the Bruins because that's my hometown team.
Right.
So I think this is going to be a fun way for us to kind of just have conversations about the game of hockey, the NHL, and even outside of the NHL, just what's going on around the hockey sphere. And I'm really excited to do it with you, Jaws, because quite frankly, I've been a fan of your channel here for a while. The amount of hard work you put into your channel, dedication, the live streaming, and just how hard you work. It's why I've always kind of asked, like, hey, like, would you be interested in doing a hockey podcast? Because I know with your work ethic and will definitely help rub off on me, and we'll pause and we'll make sure that I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Honestly,
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, we were going to do this last year at this point in time.
yeah.
But then Fluffy passed I spent 2 months sleeping with him on the floor. I was not in any kind of physical or emotional shape. And also, like Paul mentioned, we were streaming every night for the Panthers. We stream all the Panther games, and then we'll stream another series. So basically every night during the playoffs is when we're streaming. Now, speaking of playoffs,
Ooh.
Paul Bissonnette.
No
Paul
relation.
Bissonnette put the tinfoil hat on,
Uh-oh.
and he said that the Panthers are probably tanking a little bit to get the Leafs and to avoid the Lightning. And my response to that is only a moron would rather play Tampa right now than Toronto. Because just the goalie situation alone, forget the team, forget the travel, everything else. The Panthers have enough trouble scoring right now. Can you imagine what Vasilevsky would do to us?
That's just kind of an insane take. Like, who is ducking the Maple Leafs in any playoff series for the Tampa Bay Lightning with Vasilevsky healthy and net? I mean, that's just an insane take. And I don't think Florida's tanking. I mean, I just think the accumulation of the season and some injuries, and maybe they're not clicking all cylinders. But I mean, listen, I think, and we've had this conversation off the podcast, I think if the Florida Panthers, if it did kind of work out that way, Florida versus Tampa, that's a far more difficult series than Toronto. Toronto's got to prove it to me with their goaltender. I mean, and Stolarz, hey, he was your boy last year. He had a great year for you guys last year.
Yep, no doubt.
But he's got to kind of prove himself in the playoffs.
And that's the thing. No disrespect to Stolarz, and I'm certainly not saying Toronto is going to be easy. But look, Tampa won a couple cups, right? Now they're rested, they've reloaded. Vasilevsky had his injury. He's come back. He's looked good. He's maybe not prime Vasilevsky, but still, the difference between those two teams playing him in the playoffs, it's to me, it's a no-brainer. Now, do I think we're actually losing on purpose? No. When I say we, I say the Panthers. Do I think we're losing on purpose? I mean, the last game we did sit Reinhart, Bennett, and Forsling. So, I mean, you know, I think Maurice did make one good point about taking the guys out and putting in the AHL players and everything. And this kind of fits with any team, really. He's like, it's actually good for us to do this right now because it's forcing us to really adhere to our system.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And even though we've lost a couple of games, we've still only allowed 2 goals in each game in regulation. So how do you think it's all from your perspective, from a Bruins fan perspective?
From the bottom of the Eastern Conference standings perspective.
My apologies for breaking your team. I really am, I just
we got to end the show. No,
I mean, it wasn't bad enough in the President's Trophy season. You guys actually came back for more last year. So
I quit the show. It's official. But honestly, kind of, it's going to be interesting to me. Like, let's say it does pan out being Florida versus Tampa in that first round. I think that's going to be a fun series to watch. I think the Battle of Florida is always fun, and it's kind of funny. Like the Florida Panthers for years was kind of like the little brother, but Florida, they had that great Stanley Cup championship run last year. I think their Panthers are kind of primed to keep going here the next few years. I mean, they're all in, right? You don't trade Spencer Knight and kind of lock into like a Seth Jones contract if you're not fully bought in and understanding like this is your window now, which I appreciate. So I think that would be really good hockey. I also think for Toronto fans, if they get the 1 seed, that's not necessarily the best thing either, because they would be facing off against the Ottawa Senators most likely.
Right.
And, people want to knock Olmark, but he could get hot and he could goalie the Maple Leafs. I think the Eastern Conference is going to have some really exciting playoffs in the first round. And
getting through, especially the Atlantic. And that's the thing that we're looking at with Florida right now is Ottawa's only 2 points behind.
Yeah.
And so with Ottawa, if the Panthers keep losing, Ottawa's going to pass them. And that's the whole thing that Bissonnette is talking about.
Yeah.
And I know there's the whole travel aspect to it and all of that, but you also have to think about Montreal. Now, I've been cracking the joke for 2 weeks that I want Montreal to get that 8 seed so they can go beat the Capitals in the first round.
I mean that's like pain. It's just reminding me of my own pain. It's because I just pull up the standings. It's like, I mean, you're right. Ottawa could, if they keep going on a win streak here, they could slip into that 3rd spot. Yeah. And then that would actually slot a Florida versus Toronto series, which I think I still would put in favor of the Florida Panthers just because of the style of play.
Right.
And I mean, Montreal, it's pretty much a guarantee they're going to be in here in that 2nd spot. Do I think they upset the Capitals? I don't think so, but I didn't expect my team to get my heart shattered. So I can't say a confidence on that. I was, what? I was buying in. Good thing I'm not in a bet man because I was talking a ton of shit that year. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna win the cup, and then just nope, that's not the case. But
hey, I feel you there. Remember, it was the Panthers that was the President's Trophy year, but the year before that, right? And Tampa swept us in the 2nd round. So I grasp that. So now, I'm pretty sure. I think we all would agree that it's pretty much set. I don't think Montreal is going to blow this. I think they're going to end up with the 8 seed.
Yeah.
Looking ahead before we get to the rest of the playoffs and everything. I'm putting him on the spot, by the way, because he asked me what we wanted to talk about, and this was not on the subject list. Do you think this is my hypothetical, imaginary conspiracy theory that if Montreal can somehow ride out one more year with Monty, and he has one more year on his contract, right? I think we kind of know he's not bringing them to a Stanley Cup. But if they could ride that out, do they have the assets to offer sheet Spencer Knight away from the Blackhawks?
Ooh. Yeah. Oh, so this okay, so that gets interesting because does Spencer Knight want to be with Chicago? It just depends because,
Yeah, that's my point.
you
Right.
know, listen, and I will say because I have kind of followed the Spencer Knight after the trade. I think he's looked great considering what's around him. I think he's been done
Yeah.
pretty solid.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's so the one thing is right. You got Dobish, who's the backup currently with the Habs, but then you also have Fowler that's currently playing for Boston College, the
Okay.
BC Eagles, who's a very high prospect, the best goalie in NCAA, I think, right now statistically, and he's looked at as like a franchise goaltender. So we all know with goalies, it can be a little bit weird. Sometimes they can go, a little bit earlier in the developmental path where they'll get in the NHL, but sometimes it takes a couple seasons, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it would be an interesting conversation. I do agree. Montembeault to me, I think, is like an average starter, right? Like he'll have some really good games, and then he'll have some games like, what the hell was that?
Right.
And that's kind of the blessing and the curse with Montembeault. He can rob you a few games and really just carry you, but then other games it's like, do we have a shooter tutor in net? Like what's going on here? So it's to me, I don't think that happens because of the goaltenders they have in the system. I think they really believe in Fowler. But do I think Spencer Knight with the Habs and with all the prospects they have would look really good? I mean, yeah, I do think that would be kind of an interesting thing, personally.
Well, and I guess it also might depend on how far along Montreal's development becomes, and if Florida, Tampa are still in the mix, how much longer is Ovechkin? Montreal might see a window of opportunity where if they could pick up Spencer Knight, maybe they make the move Fowler for Knight because maybe they feel like they're ready now and Fowler would be ready in 3 or 4 years.
Right.
And if you put Spencer Knight on a team, we've seen it with the Panthers. You've seen his numbers with the Panthers. You put him with a really good team. He can. I think he's the guy that could eventually win a cup for a team.
I do. I think he's got the pedigree, right? I think a guy like Spencer Knight's had the pedigree. That's why a couple of years ago, or a year ago, when he was down with Charlotte or wherever it was, Chicago, wherever was the AHL affiliate that was at the time.
Yeah, the Checkers,
the Checkers. We were kind of having that conversation because I do believe in Knight as a goaltender. I think sometimes teams push goalies up, but I'm not really blaming Florida on that. I think Bobrovsky was kind of pushed by Knight at one point, but then Bobrovsky kind of turned his career around, right? He kind of found his game again. So it makes sense what like you're going to go with Bob and you're not going to have two goalies with significant cap hits on the book against your cap. But it's interesting. I think if you do move a goaltender, it would probably be Dobish instead of Fowler. But if they could kind of make that work somehow and get a guy like Knight, I think you would instantly improve that team in Montreal. And I think like you have Demidov, who's going to be coming over, I believe, next season. You have more prospects within the system. I mean, when you kind of really go into what the Habs have in their system, and I've spoken about this for the last season or two, the Canadiens are going to be one of these teams that will be really damn good for like probably 5 to 8, maybe plus years in a row. Maybe I'm not saying perennial cup contender, but a very good playoff team, and then with some cup window in there. Because I mean, I do like what they have with Suzuki and Caulfield and some of we've seen what Hudson's been able to do. Not to ramble, I like what they have there. I just think of minor pieces. Like I think a guy like Knight would be brilliant because he has the NHL experience and he has shown the success and the capability to be a number one. It's just I think kind of making it make sense for the Blackhawks to take that deal.
Yeah. They're gonna need to pay well, and because we did just have this summer. I forget who it was, but they lost. Was it Edmonton that lost 2 players to offer sheets?
Yeah. Was it was Dylan Holloway offer sheet, or was he? Because he killed it. He was killing it for the Blues, which is kind of funny. He struggled with the Oilers, and then I don't remember if he was just a UFA or what happened there.
That's all a blur for me because I was half celebrating the Panthers winning the cup and half was putting Fluffy on the ground. So everything that happened during free agency, we covered it. And when the season started, I'm like, y'all remind me what happened? Because
dude.
brain was gone, man.
I mean, listen, I'll fully admit with what happened this past year with my mom passing, I'm honestly, that whole last summer it's
Yeah.
a blur. It's a blur.
Yeah.
I don't really remember much, honestly.
Yeah, no, I get it. Now moving to the West just a little bit. Do you think the Kings can finally beat the Oilers?
You know, it's weird because I hate the Oilers goaltending. It sucks. Like I don't believe in Stuart Skinner. I don't believe in Calvin Pickard. I think he's an okay backup. I like the story. I like the Kings. I do. It's just for whatever reason they lose,
Yeah.
and it's like it's because to me as a hockey team, I think the Kings like 200-foot game. You know, you have Kopitar, who's a one of the best two-way centers in the game. Byfield, a young, nice, good player. I mean, well, they got Darcy Kemper there in net now, who's having a great year.
Yeah.
I think the Kings have the pieces to beat the Oilers, but then it's like they have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and whether you want to call that a very lack of like having a lack of scoring depth, it's still two of the best players on the planet, and that just it makes it difficult to play against them because the Oilers can be outplayed, and we've seen this in playoff series. They can be outplayed for a lot of a game, but then Draisaitl and McDavid just make a few quick plays, and it's like, okay, oh, it's 1-1. Wait, why is it 6-1 now? What the hell?
Right.
What just happened?
Yeah.
It's I like the Kings system. It's just it's hard for me to bet against the Oilers, even though I think Stuart Skinner is not good.
I know. Well, the two things. I mean, Skinner kind of reminds me of what Kemper was before. He's playing well now, but Kemper was just kind of a guy, and then gets with Colorado, and we see what happens there.
Yeah, what's the cup?
The Kings and Oilers kind of reminds me a little bit of Bills Chiefs. Like you look at what happened to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl this year.
That's a good one, actually. That's a good comparison.
And I'm sure the Bills fans are like, we couldn't beat them. Are you kidding? You know, and it's just sometimes those teams they have your number.
Yeah, they do.
Your number.
And I think that's actually a really good comparison. I think that could be really what it is. It's just I think for whatever reason the Oilers have the Kings number. So in a playoff series, I'm just going to kind of lean towards the Oilers because of the history of success we've seen against the Kings recently. You know,
right, yeah. And then when you look at the rest of the West, I mean, especially when you look at this playoff field, there's multiple teams that have won cups that legitimately could win another cup.
Yeah, I mean, Vegas, I mean, they've had another good year. Colorado, while they've kind of a little bit of a cool streak recently, they still have a lot of talent. They made some additions at the deadline. It's interesting, right? Because you have a mixture here of some teams that are kind of new, like the Winnipeg Jets, their historic first-round exit. I mean, actually, let me ask you, do you think the Jets will finally get past the first round this year? Just genuinely.
Well, we don't know who they're playing yet either, right?
Well, it's pretty much gonna be. So St. Louis has 93 points because they just lost their first game in 12. They got their 12-game winning streak snapped last night. They have 93 points. The Minnesota Wild have 91. Now Calgary has 87, but so Calgary could kind of sneak in there, but it's going to be most likely either Minnesota or Calgary.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Because is Winnipeg? They're winning the top seed, right? They're in the conference. They're the
best. Yeah, they're the best team in the NHL. So they're going to be taking that the lower wild card spot. So let's just say for right now, but let's say the Wild. I mean, I think if they're going to beat a team this year, kind of.
I think if you're looking at the Wild or Calgary, I think they finally get off the schneid. I think if they got to play the Blues, you know.
They beat them last night, but it's going to be interesting. It's because I know Jets fans will probably hate us for this. It's just hard for me to believe in the Jets because they got to prove to me they can do something because this is probably their best year they've had in a long, long time.
Yeah.
But they've had some really good years, and then they'll just lay an egg in the playoffs.
Right.
So, you know, we've kind of seen that, right? Like with teams like the San Jose Sharks, right, when they had Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau, like great regular season teams. The end of the playoffs, maybe the occasional deep run, but it's just kind of like, it's kind of disappointing. Like, you know, they don't get as far as they probably should.
And look, you and I, as Panthers and Bruins fans, have both seen up close and personal that the regular season don't mean squat.
Nope.
It
doesn't.
It doesn't mean anything. Home ice, right? And for most of these teams, if you've got a good, solid mix of veterans, the road game is that, yeah, we got to go play in Boston or you guys got to come to Florida. It's something for the better playoff teams. Sometimes that's an advantage because you get that back up against the wall type of attitude going.
You get that extra juice.
Yeah, especially with the Panthers, we've seen where just they can't handle prosperity at all, just at all. They just can't, right? I mean, you get up. We were this close to getting reverse swept.
Respect it. We
We
got to make life difficult, right?
Right. Yeah. It's how they roll. So, yeah, I think Winnipeg finally gets there. Maybe not. I don't know about making it all the way to the cup or anything. Maybe it's just because Vegas beat my team, but Vegas is the one team I have trouble betting against. They've just, when they get going and they're playing well,
right?
They're a tough team. They're a tough team to beat.
They're big too, right? They got some good speed, but they're also like a bigger physical team. They're just perfectly made for playoff hockey. And Aiden Hill, he's shown he can get hot and he can, help lead a team to a Stanley Cup victory, right?
Yeah.
And to me, he's proven he's been there, done that. I mean, we've seen goaltenders that might not have like the sustainability in the regular season where they're consistent, but then when they get in the playoffs, it's a switch is flipped. Hill has kind of had the ability to do that. So Vegas is a team that's very hard to bet against. And just kind of looking at it, right? Another team, I want your honest conversation because it looks like it would be, it would look like it would be Dallas versus Colorado. Dallas made the big swing of bringing in Granlund from the San Jose Sharks.
Well,
is this the? Go ahead.
When Colorado traded Rantanen to Carolina, first thing I said was, he's not going to sign at Carolina, and he's going to end up back in the Western Conference and be the reason why Colorado loses that series. Now, I thought it was going to be Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
But sure enough, right there at the end, Dallas takes them. And I know Colorado got Nishis, and he's played well for them, and that looks like it's worked out. I saw Canes fans on Facebook placating themselves by saying it was all worth it because they got Taylor Hall. I know. I felt bad for him, though, so I didn't troll. No trolling. And I think if Colorado and Dallas end up playing, I think Rantanen's going to go off. Nietzsche doesn't have the same kind of motivation, right? Because remember, as soon as it happened, Rantanen was like, I would have negotiated. I would have, you know. So there's obviously some feelings there,
Yeah.
And both are teams that have won. And I think the best news for everybody else in the conference is one of those teams gets eliminated in the first round.
Yeah, it is weird, right? Because that division, just kind of looking at it, you have Winnipeg, Dallas, Colorado. All three teams are extremely good, and that's going to be an interesting storyline. I actually, funny enough, I really didn't think about it, but yeah, Rantanen facing his former team in the first round, he's going to have that extra, jump in his step, and I think that it's interesting, right? Because I think Dallas lines 1 through 4, D pairs 1 through 6 is the deepest team, right?
Right.
And maybe you could argue maybe Winnipeg or something, but to me, that's the deepest team because they have just a plethora of depth scoring.
Right.
And then Colorado, in comparison, they made some nice additions. Don't get me wrong, but they're kind of they're top heavy, right? You got McKinnon, Natchez, all that. Like they're a top heavy team, but they can score in bunches. And I like their goaltending situation. I can imagine that series going 7.
Oh yeah.
Who do you think wins?
Dallas.
You think Dallas?
I think Dallas will take that, and I know Colorado fans are probably feeling, that they're ready to go again. And that's what I was saying earlier is there's a lot of teams that have won or come close to winning that. I mean, we're not even talking about the Oilers, right?
Yeah.
And you look at all these other great teams, and I'm sure Edmonton fans are like, hello. We are the conference champs, right? And we just kind of put them aside over here. Well, yeah, okay, right?
Yeah. You like we know what you did.
Yeah, we know about you guys. So, yeah, I think Dallas would probably take that, but I think Rantanen would play. I think Rantanen would play a big role in that, and. Both teams have kind of had equal amounts of, disappointment, right?
Yeah.
And I just look at it. I think goaltending might could be a difference there.
And it goes into that conversation is like, to me with Blackwood, I'm been a big fan of Blackwood. I think he's got unfortunately injured, but I mean Ottinger, he's shown the ability to kind of step up his game.
Right.
That will be an interesting goalie match. And I think it'd be a good determining factor of like Blackwood's legacy in some sense.
Yeah.
And I think for a guy that's come back from injury, it's remarkable. I mean, he played in the, it's San Jose. It's beautiful, but it's a hell to play there on that terrible team. And he kind of, salvaged his career. But for me, it's like, you got to show me in the playoffs, you can, this regular season success you're having.
Yeah.
Can you have it in the postseason?
Yeah.
And that's a true question to have.
Yep, because everything is magnified. I mean,
so
just
how many games? How many games do you think actually? And like, if they're going to win, Dallas versus.
I would agree with you that it'd be a 7-game series. I'd be surprised if it's 6. I mean, both of those teams. Eliminating either one of those teams is not going to be pretty.
No.
And I just can't imagine a scenario where either team is going to let the series get away from them, and unless Blackwood can't handle the juice, right? Yeah. Unless something like that happens, I would suspect that would go 7 games. Which is that series is good news for the rest of the conference because that's 2 big heavyweight teams. It kind of like if it was Florida versus Tampa. I'm sure Toronto would love Florida and Tampa. One of them is gone in the first round.
Yeah, no, you're right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think, for me, I'm going to pick Colorado in 7, and I will say depth-wise, Dallas a little deeper. Nathan McKinnon, Natchez, I also think Blackwood. This is more of a heart pick. I'm going to be honest with you. This is more of a heart pick. But they're 2 great teams, though. Yeah. But wouldn't be surprised if Dallas won it, honestly.
Now, on that note, which one of these top teams gets eliminated quickly?
It's let me look. Toronto? No.
I was just getting ready to say, don't forget, Toronto's about to win the division.
So, Toronto I could see just because it's Toronto. Washington's had a great year. They really have. And I think they'll most likely win that series, but it wouldn't shock me, right? After getting the record, Ovechkin getting the record, and there's just, okay. Right. It's over with. We got it done. And then there's a little bit of dip there. I wouldn't be completely surprised, especially since like they were really kind of gung-ho for that. Kind of looking at it, I mean, I know that it would be against Montreal, and I think Washington is a far better team. But, I mean, to me, that would be the only concern. But outside of that, like Toronto and... It's probably that. It's probably it. Like, I'm looking at it. It's probably it.
Yeah. And look, Toronto fans, I know there's a lot of you. No disrespect. We're not saying you're not a good team. We're not saying you'd be an easy out. It's just history.
Yeah.
It's just and goaltending. I mean, Stolarz has had a good year.
Absolutely.
I talked to some people on the stream yesterday because I've got Toronto fans that come every day at noon, and I asked him, I said, which goalie do Leaf fans want? And he said most people prefer Stolarz.
Yeah.
And I know he played like a period against Edmonton when we were getting our butts handed to us. So I'm not gonna
Right. You
hold
can't hold
that
that
against
against them.
him. Yeah. But first time in the playoffs, just depends on who they play.
Yep.
And as much as I want to play Toronto, or would prefer to play Toronto over Tampa anyway, Toronto versus Ottawa would be a hell of a series now.
I agree. That would be a hell of a series. I mean, that'd be fun to watch. I kind of even made a little bit of yesterday with a live stream, just 5 Canadian teams potentially being in the playoffs. I think that's kind of good news for Canadian fans. I'm pretty sure they're happy with that.
Yeah.
But a Toronto versus Ottawa series, I mean, Olmark versus Stolars. I do want to kind of mention, because Joseph Wall, he hasn't been the better goalie this year because, multitude of factors. But playoff wise, it's only 7 games.
Right.
He's a .933 save percentage.
Right.
So, that is a guy that could technically turn to like, okay, he's shown us a little bit of success there, but I do agree. I worry about the goaltending, and I think if they played a team like Ottawa that has the ability to score, and they have a goaltender in Olmark, how much you want to bash him when he was healthy, I mean, he's looked good. So
Right.
Olmark can get hot, and I don't know if that'd be an easy matchup for Leafs fans. I don't think it'd be a quick sweep or anything of that nature.
No, certainly not. And of course, as long as Brady Kachuk is healthy, and then when you look over in the Metro, it's like
Yeah.
there's like no belief in anybody over there. It's like the Canes and the Devils will probably be one of the least watched playoffs series
Yeah.
in recent memory.
Yeah, because it's kind of like when the Islanders make the playoffs, right? And they maybe win around, like nobody cares because it's like, okay, like it's just and I know no shade to Islanders fans, great fans, but the teams are always it's just mediocre. It's like, okay, yeah, they're a playoff team, like okay, maybe, but maybe they win around, but usually gets demolished in the first. Like it's the Devils. They're a team I picked like to do pretty damn good at the beginning of the season because I'm like, okay, the potential, all the youth, all that stuff.
Right.
And I know there's been issues, injuries, and all that things, yada yada yada. But I think Sheldon Keefe is not a good hockey coach. I don't think. I think I like Rob Brindamore's system.
Sure.
I just with the Canes, it's just can they do it in the playoffs? Like, can they do something like and not be just mediocre, right?
Paul Maurice is proof that the system does work. However, what 25, 26 years he was coaching? I mean,
it takes
every single thing has to go right.
Yeah.
And I mean, just look at what happened with Florida last year. I mean, it's just like 2-1 game 7. Everything. And if you watch the last 5 minutes of that game, there's pucks that I still don't understand how they didn't go in the net.
Yeah.
So you need everything to go perfect. You need to be healthy. The goalie needs to make all the miraculous saves. And then, you can win a championship.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is not that Florida and Carolina play the exact same system, because I think Carolina's is actually a little bit even more restrictive.
Yeah, it is.
But just the number of guys that they brought in. Now, I want to talk about this with you a little bit. Earlier in the year, there was an article in the Athletic, and I talked about it on my members podcast, and they interviewed some of the agents, and they were asking about the front offices and who was easy to work with and who was not. And overwhelmingly, the agents said that the worst front office to work with was Carolina.
Yeah.
So because the GM and they have no power. It's all up to the owner. They said if the GM wants to do anything, they have to get approval from the owner. And then you look at what they've done, and they did the thing with last year with Gensel, right?
Yep.
Couldn't keep him. So what they do, they go and they do the thing with Rantanen this year, right? Now, the thing that got swept under the rug. Now, what happened with Gensel, then they did with Rantanen, and you're like, you should have already known from what happened with Gensel, Rantanen wasn't going to want to stay.
Yeah.
The thing that gets swept under the rug, though, is that they actually had made a deal to get Marner.
Yes.
And Marner nixed the trade, which
like,
means
nope.
they were still willing to trade for yet another UFA
Yep.
that probably would have never stayed.
It's I don't know how you fix that though, right? Because is it the destination of Carolina? I think some of that does play into it, right? I think some people probably don't want to play in Carolina, but I think it's mainly ownership in the meddling. It's like if ownership's willing to take a back seat and just let the general manager do their freaking job. Because making like that Rantanen trade, like I thought when they made that trade, like when it just went down, I'm like, oh, they probably have like some type of extension, like agreed upon, right? Something in the works. No, Rantanen's like, fuck this place. I don't want to be here.
Right.
Like who makes that trade then over a player you have another year of freaking control? And listen, it worked out for the Hurricanes. They got some draft picks. They got Stankoven, who they have contract control over. But let's just say at NHL level talent, because some draft picks, like first rounder, doesn't matter. They turn to be shit. It is what it is. The draft is not a guarantee. Maybe they get a Hall of Famer for all I know, and it looks great, but you never know. They downgraded. They went from Natchez to Rantanen, which, it is what it is. I think that's kind of a push all-star level. And then you went from Rantanen to Stankoven, and this is no knock onto him as a young player. I think he's an effective guy, but is he the same caliber? No. It's I don't know. I don't know what the fix there is in Carolina. Like, is it if they just lock up the owner and say, here, Silencio, stay in the padded room. Don't come out, please.
Right. And to a lesser extent, with the Panthers, now the owners are great owners. All they do is they just want to win. And when they came in, they started making some changes. And one of the things they did was they promoted Dale Talon up, and they gave Tom Rowe that general manager's position. And they were very, very hyper involved in verbal about how, and outspoken, even on Twitter. Doug Seifel would be on Twitter like a fan. And it all kind of blew up in their face. Yeah. And since then, they hired Zito.
Yep.
And retreated. They're gone. You don't see Sifu at all anymore. I don't even know if he's, for all I know, he sold part of his team. I don't think he did, but you get the impression that he's like, I don't even hardly see him tweet.
Let me fact check that.
I think he still owns part of the team, but he's completely changed his attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Like they've just completely, him and Viola have completely just backed off and let Zito do the work, that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, he's still a part of the ownership group. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But his whole demeanor, the whole way he interacted, would make you think that he sold his share of the team. We'll put it that way. Because he completely changed. Everybody changed to hands off. And I think that's the answer, is that the owner in Carolina probably is not going to change his stripes unless and until it all blows up in his face.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will say this, and this is just kind of a quick sidebar. Like, I remember going down training in Florida and going to a Florida Panthers game. This was years ago. Right. And like be able to go there for $6 and I got a free beer and like a hot dog. I don't know if you remember those promotions, but
and that's what the new owners did. The old owners had devalued the product terribly.
So bad. Yeah.
And so when the new owners came in, they said, we're willing to take the hit of there being nobody in the stands. So they stopped with all the freebies. They made prices of the tickets a reasonable price so that they could build a team. And all those years where you would see nobody in the stands, a lot of that was because these guys were willing to take that loss and build the fan base back in the right way, build back fans that are actually going to pay and want to go to the games versus bring your old lottery ticket stub and we'll give you 2 tickets to the Panther game,
Yeah. It was crazy. It was amazing. It was the cheapest game I was ever been to as an NHL game. It was
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun, but it's I will say I will commend the owners realizing like where the problem, and I think in Carolina, if the guy understands like maybe if I just let the hockey people do what the hockey people know and not try to treat this like an NHL 25 game or like an NHL game on EA Sports and like I can just do fantasy trades and I'll trade this for this, like you got to understand that there's a lot more that goes into roster construction than just like I want this star player and just pick them up and not understand the long-term ramifications of that. It's I appreciate the passion in some sense, but in another it's like, for the love of God, just let the general manager do his job.
Do their job. So I want to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
And if this triggers you, it's okay. We don't have to talk about it.
Okay.
All right. We don't have to talk about it, but talk about the future of your team. What's up, bro? How come after we got Marchand, you guys were pissed off just long enough to beat the crap out of Tampa and then us? And
that was our Stanley Cup. Shut up. That was our Stanley Cup. That was our 7-game series back to back. Like that was our Eastern Conference Finals and then our finals. When Zadorov punched that guy, who was it? Did he punch Bennett? Was it?
Yeah.
When he punched Bennett, was
Bennett?
our Muhammad Ali moment.
What's that? Go ahead. Sorry.
That was our Muhammad Ali moment when Zadorov was punching him. Hallelujah! Like that was our cup win. I like listen. When the trades went down, I enjoyed seeing some of the speed and like a little bit more of the enthusiasm. And I will say, like Brazel, and he's a nice enough guy, right? He has sucked in Minnesota. In 16 games, he has like 1 point because that man has no wheels. He has negative wheels, very slow. But in the Bruins system, it kind of worked because they could kind of put his big body in front of the net or behind the net, and he had soft hands, yada, yada, yada. To me, this is the thing with the Bruins. The Bruins overachieved, I think, the last couple seasons, really, if you think about it. After that historic run, they overachieved. What that actual team on paper, on roster, overachieved what they actually were, talent-wise. And a lot of it was the system. A lot of it, I think, was just guys getting hot at the right time. I mean, like Charlie Coyle, Pavel Zacha both had career years that one season. And I think it all kind of came crashing down. And I would say this. While some Bruins fans are panicking, I'm not really freaking out about it. I just think the Bruins have been good for, over a decade and a half, like I think 14, 15 years. They've been in the playoffs. So, like, this is just a natural occurrence. You're not just going to keep being a top-tier team and a playoff contender. You're going to have to rebuild at some point. The Bruins traded a lot of assets and first-round picks for certain draft picks, or for certain players, like go into like Taylor Hall, you go into Hampus Lindholm, you go into a lot of the additions they've made overall when they've tried to go all in for like cup runs, like with Iginla, Nash, yada, yada, yada. To me, they sold their future because they believed their window was then. And listen, they lost some finals. They only won 1 cup in 2011, but they still won a Stanley Cup.
Right.
And I take it for what it is. It's just a rebuilding period. But I'm also not panicking as much as some Bruins fans are. Oh, we're terrible. We're going to be awful for the next few years. I genuinely believe that with getting the 4th overall pick, and if hopefully draft guys, please give me more. Give me Misa. Give me the 1st overall pick, please. But I think genuinely the Bruins, maybe next year, I wouldn't be surprised if they're back in the playoff picture in like a wild card spot.
Right.
Because Elias Lindholm, you've seen a little bit more life from him recently. He was not matched with the proper line mates. The current players in the system do not match his style of play. And I'm just going to say this, and this might be kind of a hot take. Montgomery fucked the Bruins.
Oh,
he didn't want to be there. He was negotiating with St. Louis. I will not be surprised if there is some tampering charges that come down and St. Louis has something happen to them, because Montgomery quit on the Boston Bruins. He did. And he didn't want to be there. And I mean, it is what it is. Happy he can kind of go and be in St. Louis and, do his thing. I don't have any hatred for the man, but he quit on the team. So now you have to install, you can't install a new system under Sacco, and I don't really think he's the long-term fixture.
Right.
There's just so much that happened this season with injuries, with losing Charlie McAvoy, Hampus Lindholm for a significant amount of time. When you're having AHL defensemen play so much time at the NHL level, they're going to get exposed. Like with Mason Lohrei, and I'm sorry for this rant, with Mason Lohrei, who I do think has a decent ceiling. When you're depending on him to be in a top pairing role and to play 20 plus minutes a night and be relied to be good defensively, that's setting yourself up for failure. And I just, it stinks. It's a little bit frustrating to watch these games. I mean, when they got just bent over by the Buffalo Sabres the other night, I wasn't enjoying that. But at the same time, it's like, I think if they could make a free agent signing, Marner, if they could make or even just a solid second line guy, and then you just make maybe a trade for like a solid enough center. I don't think the Bruins are that far off from being back in the playoffs. I think they could be a bubble team next year, and depending on how the draft and how things go with how they've kind of traded to get draft capital to kind of to boost up the farm system, I think there is hope. It's just,
so who do you want as coach next year, Torts or Quenneville?
Neither. I actually, I would Tortorella.
What about Babcock? Let's throw him in there too.
No. Quenneville's got, we both know Quenneville's got that whole thing around him that, no, I don't want that whole Chicago Blackhawks scandal. Right. What is with Chicago and scandals, by the way? Like the White Sox. Anyways. But I think, Babcock, no, I would rather chomp on a Sinai pill. Tortorella, listen, I actually like Torts as an individual and a personality.
Yeah.
He works in short samples. Like if you have a limited window, he works. But I just want some brilliant young offensive coach to come in here, because the Bruins are using the same old system they've had for years, and there's different players in the system. I think you can bring somebody in there that has a little bit better of an offensive mind that can, try a different system that maybe benefits some of these players in their actual style and fit. Just because it's plug and play, and it's not been plug and play for the Bruins right now. I don't know the head coach, honestly. I'd have to really kind of look at who the possible prospects would be. I mean, there was Denver's head coach in the NCAA. There's a few guys that have been rumored to be in the conversation for the next Bruins head coach, but I'm hoping it's someone that's willing to kind of shake things up and install a new system in the offseason.
Do you guys, I don't know if you'll know this or not, but do you guys have any former players that are in the coaching tree anywhere?
You have Chris Kelly's currently an assistant. He was like on that Stanley Cup team in 2011. I don't think Patrice Bergeron would want to coach. I think he's enjoying his gig on the regional network, just kind of chilling.
Yeah.
Zdeno, I mean, Bergeron is within the organization. I know Chara's within the organization. I mean, that would be kind of funny seeing Chara behind the bench. I'm not too sure if they would go with a former player, or if they did, like for example, bring in Chara. I think they would bring in like another guy to actually be the head coach, and then Chara would be like an assistant type deal. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, your thoughts? Is there anyone out there that you can throw?
No, I was just thinking about like Panther former players that are in our system. I was just wondering if you guys, because we've got like Derek McKenzie, we've got Sean Thornton. Not that he's in an administrative role, but we've had some guys. Luongo obviously is there with the goalies and everything. I'd love to see Luongo behind the bench one time.
Dude, Luongo was a legend, man. That guy was so good. It was unfortunate he never won a cup. I mean,
yeah.
Unfortunate.
Yeah. There was another question I was going to ask you. Oh, yeah. How you guys are confident What's the debate within the fan base of whether or not you picked the right goalie?
All right, so we will see you next week. No. So listen, this is the thing. I was mad with the Bruins when they decided to just deal Olmark for like a box of cookies or like a Sam sandwich, right? Because Castelic, I like what he is. I mean, Dean Letourneau from BC, late first round pick, and that was more of a promise pick. Some people are like, oh, he's already bust. I'm like, the kid's like, he's a kid, like he's 6'7". He's gonna have to figure out, and he's a freshman at Boston College, one of the best teams in the NCAA, right? So he's not gonna get the ice time. So we'll see kind of what he turns into. I didn't like the return on that, and once you dealt Olmark, it was pretty much all the bargaining power was in Swayman's court. So I don't think that was dealt in the best way. Hindsight, looking 2020, I think it would have been better off just keeping Olmark, because I think Olmark proved in bad situations like in Buffalo, he was still able to be a very solid goaltender.
Right.
And that's difficult to do. I mean, we have seen Buffalo break the spirits of goalies and just make them want to retire. I think when it kind of comes down to it, some Bruins fans think they should have went with Olmark, but I'm not going to be a revisionist in here and say I didn't think that Swayman was the better option at the time, because he's younger and he's showing the promise. Right. The one concerning thing I have with Swayman when watching him play, he's got the athleticism. I think he does have the compete, even though he can kind of get lost in the stupid stuff at times. It's his rebound control and his reading of the play, right? Last year he was very good. This year he just hasn't been reading the play that well and has been off his angles due to that at times. Now, the last couple of games, he's looked like the guy that we signed for a ridiculous amount of money. But, it's one of these things. A lot of turnover happened this year. You had AHL guys playing at the NHL level. I think there was a multitude of factors. I think Jeremy Swayman can be back to being like a 9-10, 9-15 plus save percentage guy. But the honest question is, when you're paying a goalie this much, do you think he's going to be a Vezina guy?
Right.
Last year, I would have said, oh, yeah, I think eventually he'll win one. Now I'm like, will he be consistent enough to do that? He's got to prove that to me. I think he can bounce back. I think he'd be a solid NHL goaltender. I'm not sure if the ceiling is as high as I once thought it was.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. So last thing before we go. Now, I'm going to tell you what my pick was, and I'll tell you what my pick is now. So at the beginning of the season, I somewhat predictably and somewhat embarrassingly picked the Panthers and Predators in the Stanley Cup final.
Oh, wait. Oh, Jesus Christ. You poor bastard.
You poor bastard. So now, being that I run the Panthers channel, I cannot back off of the Panthers prediction at this point. They would
throw you out of the fan base. They throw you out of the fan base.
I can't do that now. So I have consistently said that they would repeat, and because it's my job to say that they're still going to repeat, I'm going to say that. That said, if they don't repeat, I can pick out about 4 teams from the West that would probably be the team that would win over anybody from the East. As good as Washington is, and as good as Florida is, as good as Tampa is, Winnipeg, Dallas, Colorado, Vegas. I'm not even mentioning Edmonton.
Yeah.
What's your take?
So just so you don't feel as bad, I actually picked the Florida to go back and win it again as well. I'm saying that as a Bruins fans, Florida fans, so you should subscribe to this channel for that, right?
Exactly.
I'm saying that with a heavy heart. But I think, I actually said in the Eastern Conference Finals, the New Jersey Devils and Florida Panthers, which is, I don't believe in that anymore.
I think I might have picked that.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and watch my video, but that sounds really familiar. But go on.
And then as for the West, I picked Colorado. It's like looking at it, I kind of actually have a similar viewpoint. I think the Western Conference is deeper. I think if Florida gets out of it, I think Florida's the only team, and this might sound crazy, I think Florida's the only team that could beat whoever comes out of the West.
Right.
I think Washington's been a nice story. I don't necessarily know if they're good enough. Toronto, I mean, I think they're gonna do Toronto things. So like I just think in the West, I mean, I would agree. Dallas, Colorado, Vegas. I would go with the Oilers. Winnipeg's the one where it's like they have the talent to do so, but they got to prove it to me. So like,
Right.
I actually agree with that take. I think whoever comes out of the West, if they're not playing Florida, will probably be winning the cup.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because of how good the teams are.
Yep, sounds about right. All right, Paul, this was good. You have been watching the first episode of Puck Blockers, the best NHL hockey podcast west of the equator. I'm wondering who still needs to figure that part out. It shows it perfectly encapsulates the actual educational value of this podcast. So we make you think. We make you think, and then you realize that doesn't sound right. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. We're looking at 2, maybe 3 times a week, depending on. Paul works at a strip club. He's actually
relax.
He's working the pole tonight. So if you're in the area, if you want to plug your OnlyFans, you could do that here. Otherwise,
I work on tugboats, so somewhat similar.
Yeah. There's tugging going on at the nightclub, I'm sure. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching, and we shall see you in the next one.